Hey, HTDA, and today I'm going to do something that I've been wanting to do for a very long time, and that is take another look at Desynced. It's gotten quite a few upgrades in the past few months. For those of you that don't know the game, as you can see, you have these tiny little robots running around collecting resources for you, then smelting those resources into metal bars and more complicated stuff after that. This is just a little starting facility early in the game. Pretty typical factory building stuff, but with a bit of a twist, because you can actually completely customize all the buildings in the game, plug in different components, and what you can actually also do is program all of these things, like write actual programs for these buildings, robots, and so on. Even your storage units you can program if you want, to do whatever you want them to do, and you can actually take that pretty far. However, I didn't actually do that in the last playthrough. I did do some of that, but I basically just built a nice little organized big factory, and you can do that if that's what you want to do. However, that's kind of missing the point of the game. There's been a couple of upgrades as well. So for example, we have these runner robots now. These are very simple robots that you start out with that don't actually have any components, but they're a little faster than their predecessors were, and they're just there to transport stuff. And you can actually make them right from the get-go in this robot facility that you start out with. They're really cheap to make, just some metal bars. So it's just a very easy way to scale up your production a little bit further in the early game. You also start out with some drop ships that actually land around your base facility that have some basic resources in there. In other words, it just gets you going a little bit faster than what it did before. Some other things to mention if you've played this game before as well: the resources are now a little bit more balanced than they were before. You might have seen my disclaimer in the actual initial playthrough that I've done, that you needed to start out with high resources, otherwise you would run out really fast. Now, they pretty much fixed that now, so you don't have to worry too much about that. The map is still infinite. There's some other quality of life things like the next idle unit button, things like that, to find robots that you might not have found. There's new programming stuff as well. There's some new technologies in the game. In other words, if you haven't played this game in a while, you might want to check it out once again. Or if you haven't played it at all, I really recommend this game because it's really, really fun. Now, I'm not going to go through all the details in this particular playthrough because I really want to focus a little bit on the programming side and give you some ideas about how you can take your own programming to the next level. Now, one thing in particular that I wanted to try out to see if I can optimize or actually automate combat entirely, because as you can see, what it involves combat in this game is basically moving a lot of back and forth to make sure you stay away from the enemies while shooting at them. And well, it seems like something that we should be able to automate that if we can. And it's also something that I don't necessarily enjoy doing a lot at a large scale, because if you have a couple of robots like this, it's fine. But if you have like maybe half a dozen or even more, because at some point the amount of bugs you get is pretty insane, it becomes really annoying and time consuming to do that by hand. But I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, because before we can automate that, there's quite a few other basic things that you could automate as well that are far less complicated to do. So let's take the Destructo bot that I have over here as an example. What I've done before is that I linked the go-to signal. So this is basically wherever you tell it to go is what is being put in this particular area. I linked that to the destructor, which actually allows you to destroy buildings. And that means that if I now, for example, right click on any building, it will start moving there and destroy that building. Pretty straightforward, pretty efficient, but it does mean I actually need to select this robot every single time I want to delete something. I need to delete buildings one by one, and we can probably be a bit more efficient about that by using a behavior controller. So here's an example of a more advanced type of small program that you can use to really optimize your own gameplay. So one of the new things that was added to the game is this loop signal that allows you to loop through any signal anywhere in the entire world. So I've currently set it to the color crimson, but that you can use any of these signals, and it includes things like buildings and stuff like that, that you can set your buildings or your units to transmit. If any building now is transmitting this particular signal, this will actually be recorded by this unit, by the Destructo bot, then set to the destructor. So the destructor is going to try to find that building and destroy it, and it will keep doing that until it recognizes that that building no longer exists, and then clear that from the registry and then wait for the next building to pop up that has this signal. Now let me show you how that works. So here we go, we have the same destructible as before, but I plugged in a behavior controller with the program I just showed you. I also plugged in a signpost. Now this doesn't do too much other than just giving you a text that you can put in and then show that on the map, so it's a little easier to find out where the destructor is. However, I don't really have to ever touch this thing again, because as soon as I start up this program, it will recognize all these buildings that are now marked with the crimson signal, and it will start destroying them, assuming I did everything right. And yeah, you can see it recognized that building, it moves on to the next one, and I never have to touch that again. Now, so if I would want to destroy these buildings, for example, all I need to do is set this to a crimson value, and just to give it a little bit more visuals, there you go, you can now see that it is the crimson thing. And now if I want to delete all of these things, I only need to copy paste like this. And as soon as the destructor gets around to it, all of these buildings will be destroyed. A lot more convenient than going through everything one by one. Now that is of course going to create a huge mess, so this is why I created a couple of these cleaner bots. Now these are also going to be using a new type of item that was added to the game, the Scout Radar. That does the same as the larger radar that I'll show you in a moment, but it's a really simplified thing. You can just set it to recognize one thing in the game. That can be anything. So let's say, for example, in this case, anything it can loot, it will try to find. And then it is now set to the storage unit to transport anything it picks up back to the storage over here. And of course, I do have the signpost in here as well. I'm not really sure why I have that in the visual. There we go. Let's remove that. And all I did is basically chain my Scout Radar, the output of the Scout Radar, to the go-to, and then the storage block to the storage input. And this is completely automates all the cleaning that I've been doing. Oh, this is why it was actually set to this, because now I can't actually see the text, but once I activate it again, there we go. You can see this is a cleaner. Now the only problem with this is that it will only collect things in the radar range, which actually is really huge. As you can see, I actually have to zoom out so you can see the range. But we'll improve on that later on once our base grows a little larger. Let's talk about the base, because what I've done before is basically just build a lot of these smelters and assemblers and things like that, and just scale up the production as we go, playing this game like any other factory game. You can do that, once again, it works just fine, but I want to be a little bit smarter. I want to actually use the behavior controller in order to retask these production buildings to basically produce whatever I need at that particular moment. Now, I've written a little program for that. Let me show you how that works. So this might look a little daunting, but it's really simple because it's just repeating the same thing 5 times. Now I have 5 inputs. These are the items that I want this particular building to start producing. You put those in the actual boxes that you saw in a moment. I'll show you how it works outside of this programming sheet in a moment as well. But what it's going to try to do is just check how many of these items I already have within my entire world. So it's going to check, let's say, for metal bars. And then it's going to tell me in variable A over here how many metal bars I currently have. Now then it's going to compare the number that I have with the number that I told my item over here that I want. So let's say I'm asking for 50 metal bars and it finds out, hey, you only have 20. Then it's going to be a smaller amount than what I wanted to have. So it's then going to produce one of those in the actual building, and it's going to do that by setting it to the visual marker. I'll get to that in a moment. But basically it's going to try to produce one of these items, and then it's just going to wait around for a little while and keep producing that particular item, and then it's going to reboot the program again, check, do I have enough of those items now? If you don't, keep producing them. If I do, we're going to clear the actual production, and then we're going to check for the second item. And once again, it's going to tell us how many of those I have. If that is smaller than the amount that I want, it's going to produce that particular item. And if not, it's going to move on to the third item, or to the fourth item, or to the fifth item. You could actually just keep doing this for maybe like 10 or 15 items. I don't recommend doing that because that means that the 15th item in the row is probably never going to be produced because it actually needs to have enough of all the 14 previous ones. So 5 feels like a pretty large number already, honestly, so it's probably going to be more than enough. Now, what's going to happen if I set an item, for example, metal bars over here? It's going to check that and recognize that I might not have enough. I currently have 107, so if I put a demand of, let's say, 150, it's going to start producing that. It's going to set the visual of this particular unit to metal bars, and because I linked the visual to the production inputs of these smelters over here, those are actually going to start producing those metal bars until they've been told otherwise. So let me demonstrate. I'm going to set this to metal bars, let's say 150 like I just said, and then it's going to go through that, recognize, hey, we don't actually have enough of those. It's going to set the signal over here to metal bars, and now I am producing metal bars over here. Now I can set another item, so let's say metal plates over here as well. Let's put those to 150 as well, just as an example. So you can see that doesn't actually do anything right now because I'm still producing these metal bars. But let's say I already have enough metal bars. Let's set this to 10, for example. Then once it's done waiting, what it's actually going to do, and I'm actually going to stop it now just so we don't have to wait for it. It is going to move past the metal bars because we have enough of those. Now we are producing metal plates. It's really efficient. And basically these buildings can now produce whatever I can actually produce in one of these fabricators. And I don't have to worry about building more of these as long as I have enough to produce whatever I currently have in demand. And of course, you can use the exact same principle for any type of production. So over here, for example, I am now producing the reinforced plates and the circuit boards in these assemblers over here. And what you can actually do is I signed these up and copy pasted this recipe to do the exact same thing in both of these facilities. But what I could do is basically swap this around and have this prioritize the circuit boards first before it starts worrying about reinforced plates, have this one do the other way around, and that way you can kind of balance out your production if that is what you want to do. Now the interesting thing that it allows you to do is that I now have these buildings over here that are producing various types of resources depending on what I need the most. You can again use this for any types of buildings, including things like robotics assemblers. And that actually means you have to build a lot less of this stuff. You do have to make sure, of course, that you have enough of those buildings to actually make sure you have a decent amount of production whenever you need to reproduce stuff. But you don't have to double up on everything. You don't need to produce massive amounts of things. And you can actually kind of make sure that you're not making expensive stuff, at least what is considered to be expensive early on, until you're ready to produce huge amounts of that. This just means that I'm going to, for example, in this case, have 20 energized plates all the time, but not more than that. So I'm not going to waste a lot of production on that. What you can also do is be a little bit smarter about how you set up your mall. So for example, over here, you can see I'm making behavior controller, signal radius, portable radars, scout radars, and signposts all in this building, depending on what I need. So as soon as I have less than 2 behavior controllers, this building will start producing some of them again until I have, again, more than 2. I've set up another building to produce 5 different items. You might want to duplicate a couple of these just in case you want to, for example, rapidly expand your production areas. You might need some more assemblers and fabricators. So having a couple of these make those just convenient. And then you can just add more buildings as you need. So rather than having a huge mall with like 10 or 12 different buildings, each only producing one single item, I now have a couple of these producing all the items I need. Super efficient. Strictly necessary? No, but it's really fun. And I'm using the exact same program for all of these buildings. So it's not that complicated once you figure out how to do it, and you can just copy and paste that all over the place. I also really love how you can see your entire factory kicking into gear as soon as you start things up. As you can see, I'm now producing different items all over the place depending on what I just used up. As soon as some of these robots that I just queued up are going to be produced, you'll see some of these other buildings starting to reproduce the items that I'm lacking. It's just really, really convenient. Now, speaking of convenient, what you can actually also do with the behavior controller is make your miners a little smarter than I've done before. So I have this prospector over here who's going to lead a mining group, completely automated. And if this works like I wanted to, I'll never have to reassign any miner ever again once I have them up and running. So let me run you through the technology behind our little prospector. First of all, I'm going to tell the radar, that is also a component that is in my prospector, to look for the resource that I put in there. So it's going to scan, say, for metal or crystal or anything like that. It's It's going to find any mineable object of that type, which makes sense because I want to have the miners go for that. And I'm also going to tell it to only look for those items in the power grid. Now, this is not strictly necessary, but by keeping my miners in the power grid, first of all, they won't run out of power, so that's kind of convenient, but they also won't just run off into any area that might be close by that has those resources, and that might also have aliens lurking in the dark that are going to get my miners killed. So this is just to keep them safe, basically. Now, if it doesn't actually find any resources, it's actually going to actively tell me that it's out of ore. So that is just really convenient. I will never run into a situation that I'm wondering why I'm not getting any production and then find out that my miners ran out. But if it does find anything that it can mine, it will move there, but it's going to keep a distance of 3. So this is something that I didn't really realize how to do before, but if you combine a destination with a numerical value, it is going to move there still, once you tell it to actually move there, which is what I'm doing over here. But if it also has a numerical value, it will keep a small distance from that destination. So let me show you how that works. I haven't run the program yet, so let's say I set this for crystal. Once I start running the program, and I'll also set the visuals to that, by the way, but you could change this to something else if you want it to be a little bit more obvious what your miner leaders are. Let's say for the Pentagon, for example, it stands out a little bit more. Once you start this up, it will start scanning. This is the case for crystal. It will find the crystal over here and it will move there, but you can see it doesn't actually move all the way. It keeps a little bit of distance, which is convenient because this allows me to save a little space around this prospector to basically have the miners transport the items to the prospector and then have everything transported away from the prospector as well. Now, this is just a very simple dashbot, but of course, as you get larger robots, this makes your production chain a little bit more efficient. Now, the mining team itself is actually pretty straightforward. So what you can do is just have a signal reader read the signal that this is now transmitting. What it is transmitting is actually the resources that I'm trying to mine. So let's say again the crystal that I've done before. Once I set this to crystal and I tell it to move there, well, you can actually already see the miners moving. They will instantly recognize, oh, you want me to mine crystal? Well, I see a crystal, so let me go and mine that. Of course, I have the storage set to this, so this is actually where they're going to bring their resources. And then I'm going to need some transporters to get the resources to the main base, so I don't have my miners running around all over the place. Now, you can do that with a transport route, which is really straightforward, but what I want to do is actually, again, use a behavior to have my transporters pick things up. So what it's going to do, it's going to pick up anything from the source, so in this case, that is the prospector. Then it's going to count how much items I have in my inventory of that particular item. And it's going to check if there's still additional space to get more of those. So it's not actually going to move away until it's completely full. Now, if it can't fit anymore, so the item that I'm trying to collect is completely filled up the inventory, then it's going to drop off those items to the destination. So this is going to be a storage unit. Then it's once again going to count how many items it has left. And if that is still a certain amount, so let's say more than 5 items in this case, it's going to stay next to the storage facility and keep dropping it off, or trying to drop it off at least, until it has less than 5 items in its inventory, and then it's going to go and collect some more. So this just helps you avoid the situation where your transporters are driving up and down with just a couple of resources. No, they're only going to drive up and down once they have a decent amount of cargo to either collect or to store. I've also started to really use the visual markings a lot more, like I've already shown you before. So for example, I am now marking my actual storage units so that I can tell what is going to go where. I'm marking my transporters with a specific type of signal, so I can easily tell that if these are driving around just anywhere in the world, I'll know, oh, okay, this is just one of my transporter lines, so this is not just a random worker getting lost or anything like that. The prospectors are marked with the pentagon that I showed you before. It's really convenient to kind of keep track of what's happening where. Now, another thing I've always wanted to automate was the actual exploration of the map. There's different ways you can go about that, and actually opted for a very simple scout that I'm just giving a behavior that has the scout command in it. I'm not actually sure if that's new, it might have already been in the game, But what that basically tells your robot to do is kind of move around randomly around your home base in a kind of a circle, ever larger growing circle around your base, and kind of explore the map. It's not super efficient, as you can see. I'm not entirely sure why it skipped this area, went all the way over here, and now it's going here. But that's not the point. This is actually going to kind of effectively clear up the map for you. It might run into enemies, so you could set it to kind of detect enemies like I've done over here and move away to the home base once it finds any enemies. If you do that in the early game, most likely it's not going to get very far because there's enemy lurking all around. And depending on your enemy settings, I think I've set them to hostile, so they won't actually attack me until I attack them. You can actually explore the map really easily. You can have it scan for other things as well. So for example, things like you can explore and open up. You can automate that to some extent as well, only you can't actually automate the puzzles, so I've opted not to do that. I usually don't do too much with these explorables, honestly. I don't like doing the same puzzle 20 times, but still, you could try to automate that as well if you want. Keep in mind though that these scouts that are going to be exploring are not very smart about avoiding the blight, so they might get themselves killed, but honestly I've found that even though they do get damaged and every now and then you might lose one, it's not worth spending a lot of time trying to keep them out. And this way you actually kind of figure out what's on the other side of the blight as well. So it has some upsides as well. But I have to be honest, the one thing that really made me want to try out this game again was trying to automate combat. Now, as you can see, I have this tiny little robot over here with a turret on it. And what I used to do was kind of have it move back and forth and shoot at the enemy, and then you have to move back because these things die really fast and the enemies come close to you and then they run off again, so you chase after them again and then they come back and well, you get the point. That's really a lot of clicking. It's really RTS type of style, so it's not necessarily something I dislike. It just was a lot of like min-maxing, or not min-maxing, it's just a lot of tedious work in order to actually clear out a large base of enemies. So I figured, can't I just completely automate everything? Well, it turns out that you can, but it did take some work. So initially what I wanted to do is set up a detection network, so you have all these little expansion bases I have over here. This is a very simple setup. It's just a small base with a small power field on top of it, so I can actually expand my power field. It has a solar cell to make sure I'm producing some power, but it also has a scout radar. And this is just set to detect enemies. And as you can see, it has actually detected a bug hole, which is somewhere close by. Not entirely sure where it is, probably somewhere here in the trees. But as you can see, it should be somewhere in this particular area down south here, because both of these are actually detecting that. Now, as you can see, my police force is already standing here because I automated them to, again, loop a signal and look for enemy signals being detected, and then basically move to whichever building is signaling that there's enemies close. So this will actually kind of have these things act defensively. As you can see, this building is signaling there's enemies close by, so all my battle bots moved to that building. Now, this isn't actually automated combat because, as you can see, there's no fighting happening. So what I want them to do instead is not just move here, but actually go looking for the enemy and destroy them. Now, automating combat is actually easier said than done. So this was my first attempt at that. I figured, well let's just read the signal from the enemy, have the bot move to there at the distance of 5, and that should do the trick, right? Just keep a distance of 5, and then it should move back if the enemy comes close. And if there's a different enemy coming closer, then keep a distance of 5 from that enemy. Now, if I start up the signal, you'll actually see that if I combine the scout to the signal input and I start it up, it will move to the enemy. So far, so good. However, it doesn't actually move away, so it's just a few moments from actually getting killed. Now, these enemies are pretty weak, and the shield is doing a lot of hard work to actually keep my bot alive, as you can see. But in the long term, if there's more bugs, this is not actually going to work. Okay, so that was not going to work, so I redid it once again. So first of all, I'm trying to find the enemy, so it's going to move to whichever building is detecting the enemy. And then once it gets there, it should hopefully recognize that there is actually an enemy in range by the radar telling it automatically that there is an enemy in range, then move to there. Now, first of all, it's going to move in the range of the unit, because initially I tried to just use the move away thing, but that actually doesn't get the initial robot in range to start shooting, so it just moves away. So first I need to move, and then immediately after that I need to recognize that I need to move away, and I'm once again using the same range of 5. So it works both ways. So initially it tries to move into a maximum range of 5 units, and then it's going to move away if it's closer than that. Then it's again going to check the targets and check if that's equal or not, and if there's a different enemy closer, then it's going to loop all the way around, and if there's no enemies in the range, it's going to completely get out of this loop and just start looking for a new building that is detecting enemies. So let's see if that actually works. So first of all, it's going to detect a building that is signaling that there's enemies close by. That's probably going to be one of those things over here. Of course, it's going to be the one that's furthest away. Then it's actually going to find that enemy itself, because it's again in the range of that actual enemy. It is going to start shooting at that. It's going to spawn a lot of bugs. And look, it's moving away. It's moving away. It was a little bit slow to move away though, so that is worrying me. But look at this. It's completely kiting the enemy. Isn't that beautiful? Let's just see what happens if we do this at a larger scale. So let's say I start out with 5 of these bots and I just start up the behavior somewhere in the middle of the map. As you can see, they will still recognize, oh look, we have some of these radars finding danger for us. Let's go and find them. Takes them a little moment to actually recognize that, oh, I actually moved it itself now, that there's danger here. It's going to find the bugs. Look at them getting massacred. They're all spreading around. They're a little bit slow to recognize it every now and then, but they are moving away. As soon as they start kiting, they do a pretty efficient job at that. And as you can tell, as soon as they moved away, they will like, hey, there's no enemies inside anymore. Let's move on to the next one. They move all the way back into the base once they cleared the enemies that initially spawned out. And they have a little bit of hard time actually getting up here. What you can actually see happening now is they're trying to keep a max distance of 5 from the bug hive. So as soon as you get some more long range type of units, you might want to get a little bit closer than that. But that's not a problem. This is completely automated. I could do something completely different now, and they will keep clearing out this entire bug hive over here. And they will keep moving on to all the new buildings that they will find in the range as well. As you can see, they're now clearing out another one, and they're now moving on to actually destroying that building as well. And there you have it. I cleared out the entire platform, or actually I should say they cleared out the entire platform without me being involved at all. They cleared at least like 25 different bugs from this platform. Just the 5 of them, and as you can see, nothing happened. They didn't die. They're still here. They actually barely got damaged. It's not perfect. They're a little slow every now and then, or they get themselves into a weird little corner. The actual fun stuff that happens is because they kind of spread out randomly sometimes, they move away, but they move away in whatever direction is currently the most logical from their perspective, but that might mean that they're moving out in different directions. That actually confuses the bugs and spreads them out a little bit, a lot more efficiently than what I would be doing if I'm controlling a whole group and all telling them to all go in the same direction. Strangely enough, doing this automatically in kind of a suboptimal way is actually more optimal than doing it yourself. I love this game. This is what I wanted to try out, and I think I succeeded pretty well. Now the fun thing is you can use the same radar system to actually also use your cleaners a little bit more efficiently, because usually if you have these little cleaner bots that are just looking for things they can loot and bring them back to a central storage, they don't really work that well after a little while, because your base simply becomes too big. They move out of the radar range, and that's a bit of a problem by itself. But because we have the loop signal now, we can also have these expanders just look for things they can loot. Of course, you don't want this necessarily on the edge of your empire like I've done over here to show you, but it does work, and it will just pick up all the random stuff like the dropped items that I just cleared out from the bugs. So basically on the edge of your empire you want to scan for enemies, and then a little bit more into the insides of your empire, like the exact reverse of what I've actually done over here. You can set these to scan for loot. And again, remember, you can just copy paste this on other buildings as well, so they will just start scanning for that as well. And your cleaners will pick up everything from anywhere in your entire base, so it's super convenient. and super easy to do. Finally, I want to give a shout out to the newest member of the channel, Emma, who is supporting me at the Principal Actuary level. It is not needed, but it is very much appreciated. So if you want to support the channel as well and get your name in the credits, you know what to do. But even just giving this video a like and simply subscribing is also very much appreciated and doesn't cost you anything. Now, I hope you enjoyed this little programming side project of mine and a quick overview of some of the updates that have been implemented recently, and I hope to catch you in the next one.